American culture and has become a uniquely American folk medicine in less than 80 years. Self-care, folks, itself has become a fundamental American right, spurred on by the aging of the baby boom generation and by the incredibly escalating costs of professionally provided disease care, largely featuring toxic drugs, surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. An increasing number of us are exploring wellness through self-care, physical fitness, herbal and botanical remedies, stress reduction and meditation, proper diet, and our, quote, American folk medicine, unquote, of vitamin and mineral supplementation are all means of self-care firmly embraced by the people of the United States. Behind the transparent disguise of consumer protection, the armed forces of the Food and Drug Administration are fighting a desperate rearguard action against this overwhelming cultural trend. Like the palace guard of many an ancient regime, their pistol-packing centurions fight to maintain a dying status quo, in this case the status quo of a disease care industry that is literally bankrupting America, an industry of professionals whose word is no longer accepted as gospel, but only as a first opinion to be followed by a second opinion increasingly found in what's loosely referred to as alternative medicine. FDA's desperation attacks against the new American folk medicine of dietary supplementation have two major thrusts: forcible seizure of harmless products used in self-care and deliberate suppression of information of products. They cannot employ them in self-care and will be forced to return to the professionals for the resulting symptoms of ill health. Now we're going to go through 18 of these people who have been literally terrorized, most of them out of business. February the 26th, 1987, Life Extension Foundation, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Food and Drug Administration agents, accompanied by armed U.S. Marshals, broke down the doors of the Hollywood, Florida, and Dania, Florida offices of the Life Extension Foundation. It was a nonprofit, tax-exempt foundation that provides group buying capability to several thousand citizens who wish to purchase vitamins and nutrient products. In the 12 hours allowed in the warrant, the agents seized every file, nutrient, and newsletter they were able to load on a rental truck, all of which were confiscated. The director of the foundation commented, quote, "They literally ripped the computer and telephone wiring out of the walls in their haste," unquote. On January 9, 1991, 4 years later, FDA agents joined by other agents flown in from another state raided the distribution center of Life Extension International in Tempe, Arizona, and placed an embargo on 42 of the company's most popular selling products, consisting more than 70% of the company's income. None of these products were illegal. Records were seized and employees were intimidated into thinking that they were committing a crime by shipping illegal drugs, none of which of these nutritional supplements were ever illegal. The raid took 3 days to complete. A well-documented lawsuit was filed against the FDA to block the embargo. On January 24, 1991, the Arizona Attorney General was briefed by the attorneys working on behalf of Life Extension, who were able to show the degree of the FDA's illegal activities in the case. The Attorney General ordered the Board of Pharmacy of Arizona to lift the embargo within hours after the meeting. The members of Life Extension Foundation are now requesting a congressional investigation of the illegal activities of the FDA and this program, The Hour of the Time, and me, William Cooper, urge you to do so also. November 1988, Traco Laboratories, Champaign, Illinois. The FDA, accompanied by U.S. Marshals, seized a large quantity of black currant oil belonging to Traco Labs of Champaign, Illinois. The agents who were carrying out their duties for the FDA confiscated the 5 drums as well as a large quantity of the product in capsulized form while en route from the Canadian manufacturer. It is unknown how the FDA was able to keep the vehicle under surveillance during shipment and subsequently rush in and seize the product by the roadside. They used to call this hijacking. Agents of the FDA asked the owner of the company, quote, "What do you plan to do with the extract?" unquote. He replied by stating that quote, the FDA had recently approved black currant oil, unquote. The agent threatened to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law if he sold another drop. The FDA then asked that all of the original paperwork on the approval of the extract be returned to them, claiming that it, quote, contained an unsafe additive, unquote, which was a blatant lie. The extract was not illegal and was approved by the FDA. Yet the extract contained nothing more than that which nature provided. The FDA contended that the public was in extreme danger if the extract was allowed to be sold, another lie. Traco Laboratories sued the FDA and won. In the order issued by the U.S. District Court of Illinois on April 10, 1991, the court denied the FDA's move for a judgment against Traco Labs in that the FDA failed to show that there was a genuine issue for a judgment. The judge reprimanded the FDA for seizing and embargoing the product, commenting that the FDA had misrepresented the FD&C Act section on food additives. The FDA failed to show that not only was BCO not an unsafe food additive, that it wasn't a food additive at all. The product was to be distributed in capsules as well as in bottles for consumption. Solid Gold Pet Foods, September 1989 in El Cajon, California. And this is a really doozy, boys. I'm telling you, she was selling cat food, and they confiscated it. Mrs. Sissy Harrington McGill, the owner of Solid Gold Pet Foods, received a telephone call from an unidentified person claiming to be a court official who refused to identify himself, stating that Mrs. Harrington McGill should be aware that she was to appear in court on September 25, 1989 at 10 a.m. to answer the charges of illegal labeling practices. In fact, she had not received a summons to appear in court or anything else other than this anonymous call. Mrs. Harrington McGill felt that she should at least appear to investigate the matter, in that she had been in an ongoing and exhaustive battle with FDA officials for at least 12 years prior to this time. The FDA continually made her relabel her natural pet food products time and time again, claiming that she, quote, could not claim the food was a healthier diet for animals, unquote, or that it was unlawful to state that, quote, your pet would live a longer and healthier life with natural vitamin-enriched pet food, unquote. Mrs. Harrington McGill says that each time she would change the labels and request an approval from the FDA on the changes, they would give verbal approval and would return to confiscate the foods that had been relabeled. When Mrs. Harrington McGill appeared in court that day, the judge dismissed the case on the grounds that she had not been served a summons. Now, folks, I was not aware that the FDA should be telling cats and dogs what they should eat. I mean, how many of you don't even buy cat food or dog food, but just give your dog scraps from the table or some other type of food? Could you go to jail for doing that? Are you in violation of the FDA's pet food rules? Folks, this gets even more ridiculous. Even more ridiculous. In March of 1990, Mrs. Harrington McGill was served a notice stating that her stores would be closed down due to the violation of the health claims law, which said that vitamins, minerals, and herbs were drugs and could be sold only through doctors and veterinarians on a prescription basis. Ironically, many of the labels of the products in question had already been approved by the FDA. And were you aware that the health claims law says that vitamins and minerals and herbs were drugs and could be sold only through doctors and veterinarians on a prescription basis? Were you aware of that? If you don't like it, you better get a hold of your congressman right now. Right now. And get this stuff thrown out. It's ridiculous. On the advice of her attorney, she requested a trial and appeared before the court on July 10, 1990, where a federal judge insisted that if she would plead guilty to the charges, that she would only be fined $500. Mrs. Harrington McGill and her attorney contended that she should be granted a jury trial, yet a jury trial was denied, and that is in blatant violation of the Constitution of the United States of America, which says that she has a right, and they must. Yet it was denied. On July 12, 1990, the court found her guilty and ordered her to appear at a probation officer's desk and to return for sentencing on August 27, 1990, with no trial. The judge was quoted as saying again, quote, if she would plead guilty to the charges, she would only have to pay a fine of $500 and be released. But if not, she would be sentenced to a maximum security federal prison, unquote. Folks, that's extortion. That's trying to force her to do something under threat, duress, and coercion, which is illegal. It's fraud. It's also not wise for any judge to do anything like that, because he could be impeached for this and should be impeached for this, because this is blatant violation of our creator-endowed rights, violation of the restriction placed upon government by the Constitution, and many, many other things. Isn't this something? The federal judge sentenced her for this first-time misdemeanor, and every time she had gotten FDA approval for the labels, she was still found guilty. Even though she had requested a trial, it was denied. Sentenced her for this first-time misdemeanor to 179 days in a maximum security federal prison, as well as fining the corporation $10,000. Mrs. Harrington McGill contended that the business was a sole proprietorship. Quote, the fine would still be imposed, unquote, stated the judge. Now, if you look into the affiliations of this judge, I think that you will find some very interesting alignments. The bailiff then put a chain around her waist, cuffed her hands, and imprisoned her. After serving 114 days, President Bush signed a revised version of H.R. 3562, and she was released. The bill stated that, quote, vitamins, minerals, and herbs were foods, and that storekeepers should inform their customers what their products did. The FDA told Mrs. Harrington McGill that they had legal jurisdiction over advertising. A blatant lie again. The FDA lies a lot, folks. Not so, said the Congress. Not so, said the Federal Trade Commission in a letter to her in November of 1991, stating that, quote, we are unaware of any law that gives the FDA any jurisdiction over advertising, unquote. Mrs. Harrington McGill has filed a suit with the court charging that the FDA violated her civil and states' rights, unlawful search and seizure, and denial of a jury trial. She was denied her freedom of expression and was a victim of selective prosecution, fraud, and other crimes, all illegal, and she is demanding restitution of $15 million. Here's another one, folks. I may not get through all of these in 30 minutes, but I'm going to try. If I don't get through all of them, you can call the number of the Jonathan Wright Legal Defense Fund and ask them to send you a packet, send you this report. Fall 1989. Bioenergy Nutrients, Boulder, Colorado. 3 FDA agents appeared at this small marketing company and confiscated an undisclosed quantity of coenzyme Q10, an antioxidant. When a representative of Bioenergy Nutrients asked why the project was being seized, he was told that coenzyme Q10 was, quote, an unapproved food additive, unquote, and, quote, could not be sold without the necessary legal paperwork for an approved additive, unquote. The director of the company contends that he was simply told not to continue selling coenzyme Q10, yet FDA officials never made an attempt to notify the company to cease and desist selling it before the raid. 3 years have now passed as the manager of the company watched other manufacturers of coenzyme Q10 get raided time and time again, several of which have been outright shut down by the FDA due to exorbitant legal fees incurred defending themselves. He is grateful that they have been able to continue doing business without further harassment. Quote, the local branch here in Colorado underwent a series of changes, including the subsequent dismissal of several FDA officials and personnel, unquote. He continued by saying, quote, our case must have fallen between the cracks, unquote. The company has not filed charges for the return of the products seized in the raid, although they should have, nor have there been any charges filed against the company for having sold the product, which there could not have been, because it was not an illegal product. The managers of the company are reluctant to comment on the incident due to the fear of reprisal by the FDA, noting in previous cases, which I've already disclosed to you folks, that that is the FDA's normal pattern. They come and raid with guns, confiscate material that's not illegal, do not profess child charges against anyone, and then when you sue to have your property returned, they come back with another raid and confiscate more property and terrorize more people to try to shut them up. Coenzyme Q10 is a molecule natural to every single body cell, folks. It is recommended widely by